in terms of like manufacturer selection to fit different doctors' patterns, we don't do that. We go to one place and one place only because they make them perfect how we want them. But then, the most critical thing with these instruments is getting them cleaned, getting them turned over, and then making sure when they get back up to the room, they're in good working function.
Rising above the buzz of ultrasonic cleaners and the clanking of stainless steel are the ideas and voices that are changing an industry. You're listening to the Beyond Clean podcast, the central nexus for the people, processes, and products that are improving our sterile processing world. Each week, we speak with frontline technicians, CEOs, engineers, and entrepreneurs with a common goal to help you fight dirty. Every instrument, every time. Whether you are tuning in for education or inspiration, we're glad you did. Now turn on those washers and turn up the volume. It's time to go beyond clean.
On this Vendor Spotlight, we speak with Alex Ebner, CEO at Wiggins Medical. We're going to be talking about quality-made kerosene rongeurs and surgical instruments by Wiggins Medical, founded in 1992. We're going to get the whole story from Alex coming up, including his trips to Germany and the area of Tuttlingen, where many of these instruments are manufactured. He's a wealth of knowledge. So not only are we going to be hearing about the kerosene rongeurs, but we're going to be hearing some stories. So stay with us. We're going to be right back after a short break.
From 17 studios, you're listening to Beyond Clean, the global voice of sterile processing.
Today, I have the pleasure of speaking with Alex Ebner, CEO at Wiggins Medical. And Alex, I've been excited for this one because obviously you and I had a chance to talk before we set up the interview. And you've got some really interesting stories, and I think the audience is going to enjoy hearing some of the background, especially around trips overseas. So we're going to be talking about quality made instruments, surgical instruments today. Thanks so much for coming on the show.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
So Alex, why don't you just talk a little bit about yourself? How did you find yourself working with instruments, selling instruments, and supporting, healthcare organizations at Wiggins Medical today?
Yep. Well, to give you a bit of history on Wiggins Medical, it was founded in 1992 by Bob and Sue Wiggins, and they started the company just manufacturing kerosenes in South Germany and selling them. They'd found a very high quality manufacturer, and they were working quite well with him. Bob Wiggins actually had a very storied career in medical devices. After he proudly served in Vietnam as an Army combat helicopter pilot, when he got out of the military, he started his career in management with Stryker Orthopedics, as he was a manager who covered the South and the Mid-Atlantic regions. After a few years working for them, he started working with Aesculap, a German company also based in Tuttlingen, where he worked as a sales manager. So he had been to South Germany. He had made friends in Tuttlingen that manufactured instruments, so he had a bit of a history with it. And kerosene manufacturing sales were going really well, but in 1993, him and the manufacturer took a look at a new design, and the new design was the first ceramic kerosene, and he asked Bob's thoughts, if he thought it would work well, and what he thought would be good about it. And the first thing that came to his mind, which ironically was the same things I thought when I first sold them, was, the ceramic would keep the cutting edge sharp a lot longer, and being more dense, it would clean easier. And then lastly, just the glare that reflected from the kerosenes, he thought this would be a big improvement. So after he had that meeting in Germany, he came back with a set of the kerosenes, and the very first surgeon he sold these to, it was at the Eliza Coffey Medical Center in Alabama, was to a neurosurgeon, Dr. Roger Ray. He tried them once, and then and bought them right there because they worked so well. And then in the same week, Bob received another order from Pensacola, Florida, the West Florida Medical Center, to a Dr. Bruce Raymond, a neurosurgeon there that also saw the benefit in them. After they had such great initial success with it, Bob and Sue both felt so confident about how well they'd perform that they got their first booth at the AANS in 1994 in New Orleans, where they first put the Kerrisons on display for the U.S. market to see, and it was a huge hit. So they worked the business many years, and then in 2017, Bob had kind of retired out of the industry, and Sue herself, she wanted to retire. So when I started making instruments, it was in 2016. And then my first trip to Germany was that November. And I went to Tuttlingen. I went and toured the factory, and I was a kid in a candy store watching how these were made and just how meticulous they were about all the details in manufacturing. And then in my meeting with the company, he suggested to me that Sue was wanting to retire, and if I was interested in talking to her, she was interested in selling her company. And Sue and Bob had such a great book of business just from all the years doing it that it was a no-brainer. And 6 months later, I acquired the company from Sue. Me personally, I began in the business in 2005. I started selling spine implants, total joints, drills, biologics, and surgical instruments. And I went through a myriad of different Kerrisons that every hospital was always having problems with the Kerrisons, and I sold other companies' products and nobody liked them. But then when I first sold the Wiggins Kerrisons, they were immediately adopted and very well received. And so I knew it was a very good product. And then just working with instruments in period, I'm very passionate about the tools I use on just projects I do. And so helping surgeons find the best instruments for them is just something I'm very passionate about.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I've had a lot of people that have gotten into this industry that don't know anything about sterile processing. A lot of times it's been on the sales side of things. But when they come to the table, what I talk to them about is always trying to find something that they're passionate about that relates to what they do in sterile processing. Because if they really want to make a difference, they have to have that level of passion. And I really heard that just now in your background that, there's some things just about your general interests in life that really tie over to how you support SPD departments all across the country. I think that's great.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, no, I've always said since I've been started in the business, the sterile processing department is the lifeblood of every hospital, and it's often overlooked, and it's a thankless job in most ways, but it's the most critical thing for getting surgeries accomplished safely and efficiently.
So let's talk about the company a little bit more in detail. 510K clearance obviously is really important. But also, where are the instruments manufactured? You mentioned a trip overseas. I'm going to probe you a little bit more on that because I love hearing about those trips. And Bob Mars used to talk to us all the time about his trips to Germany, and I want to hear your stories too. But talk about the instruments, just the quality manufacturing, et cetera, before we jump into that.
Yeah, great. Well, that is the best-selling feature about our products is the craft manufacturing. The factory that we work with has a long history of making spine instruments, specifically the Kerrison Rongeurs, and it's just many generations within the family of making these, learning best practices and implementing them into these instruments that a lot of people consider problem instruments. They've kind of solved a lot of the problems other manufacturers have. But in addition to that, we only make our Kerrisons with 100% German raw materials. So the stainless steel, the ceramic, everything is 100% German. Then everything is only manufactured in that one facility where they're made. So there's a lot of quality that's just central in one place. It's easy to manage, and they're able to produce such great products. From just the regulatory side, Kerrison Rongeurs are actually a Class 2 medical device according to the FDA. And with a Class 2, most cases, the Kerrisons in particular, they need to have 510K clearance to be able to be marketed and sold for spine and neurosurgical surgery. So we got that 510K designation in 2020. In addition to that, once we got the 510K, we implemented a lot of systems in our own processes. We implemented a quality management system that helps us keep track of every instrument that comes in, everyone that goes out, and where it goes to. So we have diligent records of everything from start to finish, each instrument that we sell. All of our instruments now we have the data matrix right on there. Everything's registered with the FDA, good ID, and all of them come with a unique 2D matrix that's on every single instrument. And then for an additional quality certification, last year, Wiggins Medical, we got ISO 13485 certified for quality manufacturing. And what that really gives us, or gives our customers, is just that assurance. When you buy a product from us, it is quality sourced. It's going to work well for you because we do not deviate from our quality system. One thing I found in my initial trips when I went over to Germany is there's a big difference between who's manufacturing a product and who's putting their name on a product. Not everything that ships from Germany is in fact made in Germany. A lot of times they're made in other countries around the world, and then they're sent into warehouses, is how I would explain them, going and visiting, where there's no manufacturing on site. And literally all they're doing is stamping the logo and stamping made in Germany and shipping them off to the customer. You will never get that with us. All of our instruments come from a specific factory, and they were manufactured to quality management specifications.
Yeah, I've heard about Tuttlingen, and I'm sure that there are many people listening that have, but I know that there are others that haven't. And I'd really like you to kind of tell us two things, just from a personal interest standpoint. You know, what is it like when you go over there? What are the towns surrounding Tuttlingen? How, talk about the years and years of experience, and why can't we just replicate what they do in that area of Germany here in the U.S.?
Well, Tuttlingen, as many know, is considered the birthplace of surgical instruments. It's home to many of the most well-known brands in our industry: Esculap, Karl Storz, and KLS Martin. They were all founded and still headquartered there, as well as many others. It's a very industrial region in South Germany that over the years, the factories that have been set up there and the people that work there, they're very specialized in medical devices and surgical instruments. South Germany is also home to the Black Forest, which is one of the most beautiful places to see in the world. Tuttlingen itself, it's a great place to stay right in the city center. There's a few things to do downtown. The Esculap Museum is there. And there are still many factories that are in the city center, but most of them are out in the surrounding villages. And with that, each manufacturer that we work with there is very specialized to their niche in manufacturing. And what I mean by that is our Kerrison manufacturer makes our Kerrisons, pituitaries, curettes, and other spine instruments. Our bipolar manufacturer, they only make electrosurgical instruments, and our scissors are only made in one factory that specializes in scissors. I can't stress enough that their quality and craftsmanship they're unmatched. And in that manufacturing process, it begins with only using the best raw materials. Stainless steel that is only from Germany and only from approved suppliers. The people that work in the factory, it's many years, generations of manufacturing know-how and processes for the specific instruments they make. So it's very well recognized in that aspect. Most of the people that run the factories have attended schooling and received a surgical instrument expert designation in manufacturing. So they're considered master craftsmen in making these instruments. People have asked me a lot, why can't you just make them here in the U.S.? Well, it's not as simple as just taking a design, a drawing, or even an instrument to someone and saying, can you make this for me? Sure, they can make it, but there's so much know-how into all the different aspects of production that there's just no way to replicate all the processes that are done to make these instruments perform as well as they do.
Yeah, and you have years and years, like generations of experience passed down literally from parents to children. And
grandchildren even.
And grandchildren. Yeah. And it's really a fascinating industry that way. And, thanks for sharing that. And I think also you were just mentioning Rongeurs and how problematic they can be, especially I'd say the areas that get highlighted the most are cleaning. But from an end user standpoint, surgeons are consistently concerned about sharpness. When you talk about cleaning, I think a lot about sticking. I hear that word sticking a lot. And then also durability. I've seen some that are sort of trying to address that problem, but then the metal's really thin and they get bent really easily or they get bent back. And if the surgeon grabs, a number 2 or doesn't get a 4 and they get a 2, the next thing you know, the kerosin's really damaged up pretty bad. It's not always replacement, but sometimes replacement required in that scenario. So can you kind of talk about what you're seeing along those lines? Like I painted kind of a broad brush there, but I think from a more detailed level as somebody who's manufacturing these instruments, what are you seeing out there with specifically Rongeurs, but you can talk about bone punches and pituitaries too.
Sure. Yeah. So, just to kind of start with a disclaimer, if you will, I just want to go out and say, our kerosins are not the be-all, end-all instrument for every situation. And I say that because just as surgeons vary from area to area, so does techniques and how people were trained. And if you're at a hospital, you do a lot of spine surgery, and the doctor there is the type of surgeon who, when he does his laminectomy, he wants to take the whole lamina down in one bite, and he wants to use an ultra thin for delicate use only kerosin. We're not going to be the right solution for your hospital. We make advanced surgical instruments that are designed for precise surgery when it's needed in spine surgery. It's a very difficult instrument. But from an actual function standpoint, all of our instruments, the cutting edge, the foot plate, all the everything is hand finished. So that's the first thing that gives us a real advantage in sharpness and then durability. Then the other thing is our process of putting our aluminum titanium nitride coating on the instruments. Now, I actually had the privilege on my last trip to Germany. I went and toured the factory that puts our black coating on. It's just really incredible to see. They have these giant kilns that they hook up to, or they turn up to a really high temperature. They run plasma lights throughout the system at the whole way. The instruments hang in 3 different pieces, just kind of free dangling. And then as they pump the nitride gas into it, creates a chemical reaction with the aluminum and titanium, and it puts that coating that cooks into the instrument. Our ceramic is cooked on. It will never chip, it will never fade, and it will never peel. If it does, it's completely warranted and you'll get a brand new instrument. But I've never seen it in all the years I've been selling these. So that's a big thing. And then with that coating, stainless steel is dense, but you add this coating onto it and it makes it even more dense. So a more dense surface is easier to clean. The other thing is it's not just a powder coat that's sprayed on. Like I said, it's individual pieces that are dangling. if you take my Kerrison apart, you'll see it on every crack, crevice, corner of the instrument. It has this coating, and it's a very specific and unique process to put this on, but that makes it clean easier. And as these have historically been, they are very difficult instruments to clean, to keep sharp, to keep working in a way that when a surgeon's making a real tough bite in spine surgery and he needs the thing to cut perfectly, we can deliver. And we can deliver because of the materials we use and then the processes we use to make them.
I've also seen different, techniques in terms of repair and servicing Kerrisons, including the use of like a thread lock to make sure that the screw doesn't back out, because that's like a common complaint with Kerrisons too that comes up. And I think pituitaries too, but specifically around Kerrisons, and especially ones that have, some sort of design that are meant to make them more cleanable, that you hear about that screw backing out all the time. So I've seen the use of thread lock, and I've also seen this process called peening, which maybe you can explain that process to me as well. And then how do you sort of address that, making sure that screws don't back out? Nothing scarier for a surgeon during a case than a screw backing out and potentially falling off the instrument and, sometimes into the patient.
Yeah. So it's a great question and definitely a big safety concern. One of my favorite stories, I've been selling these a lot of years, is I was at a hospital, a rather large one that everyone would know the name if I mentioned it. And I was there in the surgery, and I was, the room asked me to come into the next case because they wanted me to see what it was like using their other Kerrisons. And then that brand shall remain nameless also. But I literally went into the room, and every time the surgeon would take 3 or 4 bites, she would hand the Kerrison back to the scrub tech. He would take a Penfield and he would screw the screw back in so that it didn't back out. These were also peened screws that weren't supposed to back out. So kind of how we addressed it, it's not really rocket science, but I will say there's a lot more in engineering that's been done to the screw to make it not back out. But we reverse thread our screw, because the natural motion of a Kerrison, you're squeezing and closing. Any hinged point that's in there is going to move with that motion. So a regularly threaded screw, righty-tighty, lefty-loosey, as I'm squeezing it, it's slowly turning that screw to the left. With ours, all that would potentially do is tighten it. But again, having that reverse thread, we don't have the issue of these backing out into surgery.
All right, so here's another challenge. You might be able to tell. I used to sell Kerrisons. Another challenge that I've run into is trying to get surgeons to agree on a pattern. I feel like there were times where I'd bring in one and I could get like half of the neurosurgeons to agree, and then the other half wouldn't. And it just seemed like there was really never a solution that had enough options that you could get everybody to move forward with a pattern or a manufacturer. Because honestly, from a supply chain perspective, we do want to limit where we source instrumentation from to an extent to have that standardization. But this is an area that I feel like has always been a constant challenge for hospitals to do that. Can you talk about all the different options and patterns that you have on your line?
Yeah, so that's really one of the benefits of working with us, is it's not just one size fits all for every surgeon has to agree to one different pattern. And we certainly don't say, you have to buy all this one or all this one. So you can mix, match, pick whatever's best for you. And then we'll work with you to set up a system. So trays are tagged, they're coded for particular surgeons that have different needs in surgery. So from just the standard Kerrison size, I call them our workhorses, our 8-inch thin standard, or we even offer an ultra thin Kerrison. Now on our Kerrisons, they will say for delicate use only. If it says for delicate use only, you're not going to be able to take a lamina down in one bite. So you want to observe that as you're using it. But just in those 3 options, you go from an ultra thin, which surgeons love for ACDFs because they can really get it into the anatomy and they can get those last critical bites that they need to make. Our thin foot plates are, pretty much standard. They can work on everything, but sometimes surgeons want a little heavier foot plate, just a little more bite. If they're seeing patients that have harder, more sclerotic bone, they want like a standard foot plate. And unless you're using it to do like a laminectomy or a foraminotomy, so I typically will sell a 3, 4, and a 5 in a standard foot plate because that's more your gross dissecting kerrison. But then just as other options, our catalog's fairly limitless in terms of what you can do. If you want a longer cutting travel, we have a kerrison that can accommodate that. And then if you work through tubes and you want to have a bayonet kerrison so your hand's not in your line of sight while you're working, well, we have those in 5, 6, 7 inch. We also offer a non-ejector kerrison, which, everyone's kind of always said has been awful because, well, you can't clean it. Well, ours can be cleaned. And I can verify that. But yeah, every pattern, even the curved kerrisons, all different types of iterations. There's 4 different curve heights that we manufacture. And then we even make some pretty exotic kerrisons that will curve and actually twist for very unique techniques where you want to get the right angle on a foramen, and it's the perfect kerrison for that.
That's really enlightening. Like even just being able to meet some different types of, techniques that the surgeons would have and, versus, hey, there's this one standard type of kerrison. And you've really solved a lot of those issues. Again, from that supply chain perspective, I feel like you're going to multiple different manufacturers these days to sort of satisfy all the surgeons' preference, but also trying to standardize. It's just so tough. Another thing that comes up all the time is just damages to the kerrisons. And a lot of times, and sterile processing knows this better than anybody else, but a lot of times it's just how do they come back? If they're thrown into a container and they're banging off of each other and sliding around during transport, that's a really big issue. And because they are such a critical instrument, as you mentioned, working in on the spine, this is neurosurgery. You definitely want to have, really clean, good cuts. And so damage to the cutting surface, always a concern. I feel like there's some training on this that's really important too. How do you address, just storage and transportation to reduce damage, and how do you address kind of the training need for these particular critical instruments?
Sure. So just to address one thing in terms of like manufacturer selection to fit different doctors' patterns, we don't do that. We go to one place and one place only because they make them perfect how we want them. But then the most critical thing with these instruments is getting them cleaned, getting them turned over, and then making sure when they get back up to the room, they're in good working function. So certainly you can follow our IFU. If you follow our IFU, you will be really happy with the performance of the instruments. I always recommend that before these go down to decontamination after surgery, you spray them with an enzymatic pre-cleaner. Everyone that works in sterile processing knows everyone books their cases at 7:30, and at about 9:30, 10, the first wave of 15 to 20 case cards come down, and then the OR is always calling down, hey, I need a quick turnover on this cart, this cart, this cart, and this cart. And so it turns into a circus as to which one gets done first, and then the finger blame gets pointed around as we're trying to figure out why we didn't get those back in 5 minutes. It's a process to clean them. So yeah, in terms of training, we make videos, how-to videos. We go talk and work with the customers. We show them really not just the cleaning instructions, but what you really want to inspect for on our instruments. And one thing I kindly proudly tout about our kerrisons is our kerrison will actually last a lot longer than our springs will. So I do recommend as part of the inspection check to flip the kerrison over, look at the stress points on the kerrison. The stress points is on the springs. The stress point is going to be where the screw goes into. So after uses, and in my personal experience, now we did just change to a new spring. But I always recommend between 6 and 9 months, really checking those and probably replacing them at that point, just as preventative, because they're wearing, they're not as stiff as they used to be. So you want to inspect that all the time. The spring, make sure that's not cracked. Then in terms of looking at the cutting surface, there's several tests you can do, and most of them everyone's familiar with. Obviously, cutting the business card and seeing a clean kerosene cut is the best way to determine how it's going to work in surgery and if it's going to function properly. But what you want to do is you want, in addition to that, you want to close the kerosene all the way. You want to feel around where the cutting shaft meets the foot plate. And I even rub my finger the other way. If I can feel that cutting edge, I know it's not lining up with the foot plate. And if it's not lining up with the foot plate, we probably have something bent and the kerosene needs to be looked at. Another thing that's obvious is if you close the kerosene and you see that the edge is curled up, you'll see a gap. And that happens on occasion. And it happens, I can explain how it happens.
Twisting and torquing during the procedure.
Exactly.
Absolutely.
Exactly, but it leaves a big gap and it won't work right if it has that. Now what happens, yes, you're right, twisting and contorting, but it comes down to the right kerosene for the right application. Again, if you're trying to take that whole lamina down with just one bite and you're the surgeon and you're just squeezing it harder and harder to make it bite, there's only so much travel in that kerosene and you can only load that with so much bone. Or if you go right into a hard piece of, calcified or sclerotic bone and you just hit it as hard as you can, that also has the potential to fray that tip. Now, we can repair those. We just ask that you send them to us so that we repair them and we send them back to you in a safe and functioning way. But again, it all starts with the right kerosene selection for the right bite you're trying to make.
And what about your warranty? Like, obviously, you're talking about maintaining the quality, and you talked a lot about the ISO certification. And I think that's a big reason why you want these kerosenes to come back, for that servicing or that repair. But what's your warranty like?
So we offer a lifetime warranty for the products. The only thing we ask is that if you need repairs done or you need anything done on them, you send them to us. Changing springs, that's easy. We can sell you a spring kit, but we do ask that you use our springs on it, and it does make a big difference in the feel and function of the kerosene. Excellent.
Okay, so I love this part of most of these interviews, and it's not always included, but we've got 5 kind of comments from your existing customers that I want to read that really highlight the experience that they've had with your kerosenes. And so the first one comes from a spine surgeon in Detroit, Michigan. They say, "These are the sharpest, best performing kerosenes I have ever used." We have another one here. "We used to receive daily complaints regarding the sharpness and function of our kerosenes. Once we switched to the Wiggins kerosenes, our surgeons were happy and the complaint stopped." And this was a neuro coordinator in Huntsville, Alabama. That's really key. And especially as it comes back to sterile processing, who fields those complaints from the coordinator? It comes right back down to sterile processing. And so the reduction of those complaints is key. We've got another one here. "We have owned the Wiggins kerosenes for many years and use them frequently. Other than routine maintenance, there are no issues, and we almost never have any downtime." Another spine coordinator in Niceville, Florida. 2 more, which means this is just glowing reports of the functionality of your kerosenes. But "The Wiggins kerosenes are always functioning and work very well for our surgeons. They are happy, and I am happy to not have to worry about them every week." That's an SPD manager in New York City, New York. And then finally, "Our repair budget," and this is a key one nowadays because budgets are tight and hospitals are operating on negative margins and constantly looking for savings. This is a neuro coordinator in Cleveland, Ohio, who says, "Our repair budget for kerosenes has dropped significantly since we switched to these instruments. There is less downtime and our surgeons are happier." So you're talking about happy surgeons. You're talking about coordinators not dealing with complaints. And then obviously that reduces, the management and the complaints back down to sterile processing. And so, Alex, I love all of those, comments from your customer base, and they really speak volumes.
Thank you. Yeah, we really enjoy doing a good job for our customers.
All right. So you mentioned the springs and the importance of using the springs that you manufacture. And so I love this about how your company supports customers as well. You have free inspection and advice on Kerrisons that they've already purchased from you. But that spring replacement, super key, and repairs, that's free for anything that's needed in the first year. Is that true?
Yeah. So anything in the first year, we do one free spring replacement. Usually we try to talk to you about 6 months in and ask you if you're having issues or if you see anything with them. And then, yes, we come in, we provide the free springs. We'll even replace them if you'd like, but we do it in a way that's off hours, so we're not going to interrupt your surgical flow to be changing springs. You'll still have your instruments for all your cases. So yeah, we do that. And then if they do need any sharpening in that first year, we do that completely free. And depending on the size of the order, we usually have no questions asked trade-in on up to 5% of the total purchase. So if you order 20 Kerrisons, we don't know how it happened. It just came back looking like it bit a screw or a rod. It's not functioning. Just send it back to us. We'll send you a new one. We'll swap it out.
That's excellent. You really stand behind that quality that we've been talking about for that whole conversation today. And another thing that really benefits the listeners that are listening today is a 10% discount on any order if they use the promo code Beyond Clean on their purchase order. So that's fantastic. I do want to point everybody in your direction, specifically the website, which is wigginsmedical.com. That's WIGGINS medical.com. They can email you at info@wigginsmedical.com. They can call 1-800-497-0851 and find you on LinkedIn, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram. But one of the most innovative things that you're working on that I'm excited to tell everybody about, and maybe you can do a teaser here, is a video IFU. I just think that is phenomenal.
Thank you. Yeah. So we realize the difficulties in keeping everyone on your staff trained. And, we're always happy to come in person and do trainings, but we know how often, shift change, turnover, etc. So what we're working on, and we hope to release it very soon, is a video IFU that walks you through, not just through cleaning and sterilization and best care for transport, but we're also going to include a component of the inspection. So everything I discussed earlier, from checking the springs to checking the tips to checking the foot plate, it'll all be included in this video that new staff gets hired, they didn't see an in-service, they need to know how to inspect and treat these. They can just go into your library, download the video, watch the video, and see what they need to do to properly check them in.
Yeah, hopefully this is a big movement for the future, because just actually seeing that demonstration is so much better than simply reading the instructions, especially for newer staff. So I really want to give you a lot of credit for moving forward and taking, the IFU, which is sometimes a little tongue in cheek for people when they say, yeah, read the IFU, people in sterile processing laugh. But, I think that's partly why, and having a video explainer is just a very smart way to approach the training and clarity on, how to clean and reprocess instruments like these Kerrisons that are of a high quality. So Alex, I think you did an awesome job with the interview today. I really enjoyed talking to you and hearing a little bit more about the behind the scenes, in Tuttlingen and the surrounding communities that have been doing this quality work for hundreds of years.
Yes, South Germany is one of the most beautiful places in the world I've ever been or to visit. I'm just very fortunate and blessed to be able to do so, and then having made all the friends there that I have.
All right, Alex, thanks so much for coming on the show.
Thanks, Justin. I appreciate it.
That was Alex Ebner, CEO at Wiggins Medical, and we've been talking about their line of Rongeurs, but also bone punches, pituitaries, and really just the quality craftsmanship that has gone into these instruments and the support that you get from Wiggins Medical to maintain that investment. I think quality management system, something that we talk about all the time on this show, that ISO 13485, really important in terms of driving quality and manufacturing. Honestly, the testimonials from their customers, incredibly impressive. And I do want to remind everyone that you get a 10% discount on any order using the promo code that you're going to hear right now, Beyond Clean. It's an easy one to remember. Just put that on your purchase order for that 10% discount. Also, the innovation to create a video IFU. I absolutely cannot wait to see that as well. And remember, you get a free spring replacement and repairs needed in the first year of your purchase on those Rongeurs. Visit their website, wigginsmedical.com. Send them an email, info@wigginsmedical.com, or give them a call, 1-800-497-0851. Don't forget to follow them on LinkedIn, Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. That's going to do it for this vendor spotlight. But as a reminder, you can support Beyond Clean by subscribing on Apple, Amazon, or Google Podcasts. We're also available on Stitcher, iHeartRadio, Spotify. But the best way to listen to the show is to download our smartphone app for iPhone and Android while you're there. Give us a rating and a review. Your feedback is important to the show, and you can send us an email with feedback, or you can recommend future guests or topics or even themes for seasons. Just send that email to info@beyondclean.net. Thanks for listening to this vendor spotlight on Beyond Clean.